What we discuss in this room is really more about venture initiation. So let's look at some of the latest developments in the NFT space. I'd like to discuss Loot today. And in case you guys haven't seen it, it developed just in the last month, literally. It was it's a concept that's been in gaming for a very long time, for about a decade. And games companies that are role playing companies, and Christian will probably know a lot about this. The role playing companies would allow the player to actually hoard, if you like, or keep loot in a bag. And these loots were distributed as NFTs by the founder of Vine. Just about within 4 hours, he delivered them as free bags, and one could download it from his link. Now the bags are selling upwards of $25,000 per bag. And there was a whole bunch of thing going on in the game space where the gaming companies are developing games based on the loot's content, and also their guilds being formed based on what's in the bag, and sort of creating the experiences. So Jeanette, you want to say something about it?
Yeah, I just think this whole thing is fascinating because usually the game develops first and then the monetization. And so this is really flipping the model on its head by creating the rarity and then people building the games around that. That is so different from how it's usually done. And, you know, having been in the gamer space for a very long time, all the way back when we used to do, massive multiplayer games and have all of these different mods and different systems, it's amazing to see how this has evolved.
Yeah, and I think it's the speed of involvement that's astounding.
I can't even wrap my mind around it. It's like from I don't know how far it was from idea to $1 billion, but it doesn't seem like it was long.
It's kind of interesting because we formed Infiom to scale companies, but now the market is scaling them faster than we can think about scaling them. What do you, Daniel? You want to introduce yourself? Hi,
Hi, how are you? This is
hi.
Dan. Sorry, I was unable to unmute. Yeah, so this is Daniel Truque from Symbiont. I work on the alternative assets side of things, so creating private markets, or essentially creating markets for new assets completely, whether that is fractionalized real estate, collectibles, or just private equities. Um, Also, probably not as applicable on today's topic. I'm also a founding partner for Satoshi Capital, which focuses on quant trading and advising mining projects, as well as advising commercial banks and central banks on blockchain deployments.
Well, I suspect we'll have some mining discussions today too, because there's a lot changing in that space as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's so much stuff going on. That is actually one of the areas where I'm actually like the most excited recently. Uh, just because it's interesting seeing a lot of people from talking to people at energy companies suddenly realizing the opportunity and finally understanding that mining is not speculation. It's just it's mining. You get it out of the ground or the blockchain and then you sell it. There's no speculation on price.
Yeah, what's interesting about mining is that first, the US has a huge opportunity because of what happened in China. So, global movements in these businesses and global regulation really affects the business movement, and it's faster than any other innovation in our history. And then the second thing about mining is because there's such a focus on green, aspects of mining, there are so many interesting green technologies in the US that have not been thought of as used for mining in the past, and now I'm seeing a bunch of ventures in that space.
I think that's really true, Mariana, and I'm really interested in how the move from proof of work to proof of stake is likely to change the mining business model. I'd love to hear what Daniel's thoughts are on that.
My focus has been mostly on Bitcoin. In general, the issue with mining other smaller coins is just the volatility of the price and just the fact that essentially you're choosing winners. So it's hard for me to talk intelligently about it. Just generally, what I can say is that if you focus on a big coin like Bitcoin, then at least you know that that's probably like it's gonna be the last coin standing. We're talking about something large and relatively stable. And by stable, I mean in terms of ranking, not on price, like Ethereum. If Ethereum were to go to proof of stake tomorrow, that would be something that would be interesting because it's a large enough coin that most likely is not going anywhere. And you could probably start thinking about it on a traditional mining model just by staking. But it's not my area. But that would be my first criteria. How stable is the coin? Is it gonna? Do I think it's gonna be there? In 1 or 2 years. Not necessarily because I'm speculating on the price. Because as I mentioned, when you're mining, the moment you get a coin, you sell it because you need to pay electricity and have operations. But more because you're actually making an investment on creating something to be able to do that mining. You need to get equipment, you need to create processes. So you're making an investment on something. So if suddenly that coin disappears, you wasted the effort.
Can you comment on the fact that one cannot rely on Bitcoin price increases in the mining business? How do you separate the two, basically, the treasury function and the value of the underlying asset and the actual mining business evaluation?
Sure. So there are three factors to consider when you're going to do mining. Number one, the price of Bitcoin. Number two, the difficulty. And number three, the equipment out on the market in terms of the hashing power. That essentially determines what is your participation in the market. I'm obviating the fact here of what is the electricity cost, which I'm not including these three because that's actually like number zero is the most important thing. If you're mining anywhere with a cost of above 4 cents per kilowatt, you're probably better off just closing down your operation and buying the Bitcoin out in the open market. You're not making money from mining if you're paying more than 4 cents a kilowatt. So, assuming that you're paying a decent price and assuming that you have decent financing, a decent cost of debt for the equipment that you're financing or whatever other operational investments that you have to do, all that out of the way, the important thing is what is the price of Bitcoin at right now versus the difficulty that it's at right now. So based on the equipment that I have, which is going to have a specific hash rate, which determines what is my participation in the overall market. If difficulty is low, it means that with my equipment I can likely get Bitcoin or a decent amount. If difficulty side goes high, then my equipment may not be able to compete. It will be harder. I'm going to be able to mine less because the difficulty went high. If price goes up, even if difficulty is high, at least when I do mine Bitcoin, it's worth a lot. So the worst case scenario was actually what we had a few months ago when the price of Bitcoin went down, collapsed, but the difficulty had stayed up because it hadn't adjusted yet. So if we're talking about 3 months back, that was the worst case scenario. I was actually looking at a mining project at the time, and it was great from the point of view that we didn't have to create a bearish scenario. The current situation was as bad as it could get. So really on our financial model, what we had to consider is how long can this stay this bad? But if it's profitable at these levels, then any changes in price going up or any changes in difficulty potentially adjusting back down a bit we're essentially like frosting on top of the cake. It was extra. But always keep in mind it's price and difficulty. Those are the two things that, assuming a decent cost of electricity and assuming a given hash power rate, that is what determines whether your operation is going to make more or less money.
And is there a point, Daniel, when you look at these financial models that you say, okay, it's limited supply, the price is going to stabilize at some point at some level, and at that level, is it then profitable to still mine this network?
Well, the issue is that, I mean, this comes from the traditional markets. A market can remain irrational longer than you can remain liquid. The same thing goes for the crypto markets. If you decide that you're going to start mining knowing that you're going to lose money in the short term, that's probably not a winning strategy. In your model, you need to build in what is the expected changes in difficulty. Difficulty at least follows a very steady trend throughout the years, a steady increasing trend. There's a lot of volatility around it, but there's, if you're thinking about setting up an operation that's going to be out for like 3 to 5 years, you have a pretty good idea of what the average is going to be, at least over 18-month periods. So the difficulty is easy to forecast. The price is usually a little harder because, as we know, like, yes, in the long term it's gonna go up, but that's on longer cycles. We're talking about like 3 to 5 year cycles where you know you're definitely gonna make money. Between over the next 18 months, you don't know if Bitcoin's gonna drop back down to 30 or go up to 100,000. So if it suddenly goes to 30 and it decides to chill there for a while, depending on how well funded you are, that could kill your operation. In some cases, the margins are very slim depending on your cost of financing. So really depends. Difficulty is somewhat easy to forecast. The price not so much. So if you're gonna start your operation and from the out of the gate you don't think you can make money, you better be very well capitalized to take a year or so of losses. But in that scenario, the best thing is just wait. Another option is right now in the market we have two main families of, in the case of Bitcoin, of mining equipment: the S9s and the S19s. The S19s are much better in terms of efficiency per unit of electricity. The S9s, which is the older generation, it's much better in terms of economic efficiency. So there are scenarios where it makes sense to actually buy an older machine that would be cheaper, because given your cost of financing, you're better off buying a machine that is more efficient money wise rather than electricity wise, assuming that your electricity cost is low enough. If the problem there is that you're buying an old machine that you know it's going to have a shorter lifespan, because it may become obsolete if suddenly everybody starts buying the new generation of equipment, and essentially your market participation of hash power happens to drop to a negligible amount. To put it in perspective, if right now, well, actually, just let's use actual numbers. If 2 years ago I had an S9 machine, about 18 months later, the amount of Bitcoin I could mine with it would have gone down by 80%. So roughly in 18 months to 2 years, your participation in the market drops by, it goes down to a fifth. So having older equipment makes sense only if you can get it so cheap that it's actually financially feasible. But it's never going to be a, you know, electricity efficient as the newer equipment.
So are we looking at like a 60-day depreciation cycle on this equipment, Daniel?
In general, when you're talking about mining equipment, the rule of thumb is 18 months.
Yeah.
So when we sign deals with hydroelectric dams and stuff like that, we always go in multiples of 18, because we know that 18 months later we need to buy new equipment to keep our market participation. The advantage there is that 18 months later, your old equipment is essentially fully depreciated. So now you could run it whenever there's excess electricity. Another thing, if we're talking about wind power or solar power, or, well, actually solar power is a bad example. If we're talking about hydro or wind power, the problem with these sources is that they're seasonal. So, and for example, during the rainy season, you're going to have a lot of water, so you're going to have a lot of electricity. During the dry season, you don't have as much. The mining equipment that you buy should be running 24/7, because if you happen to buy a lot of mining equipment but you don't have enough water to run enough equipment for that dry season, uh, then that equipment just sitting there gathering dust, and it may not be profitable in your financial model. So ideally, you should always assume that you can run it 24/7, which means if I find an amazing hydroelectric dam that is generating a lot of power, I better have a guaranteed rate that they can give me 24/7 throughout the year. If they can only guarantee it for 6 months, then essentially I can only take what they can guarantee for the whole year, which is usually the amount that they can pump at the max during the dry season. The same thing happens for wind farms, only that is the opposite. In general, for wind farms, uh, the dry season is when there's more wind because it's hotter, and the rainy season is where there's less wind. So if you actually had a wind farm next to a hydro dam, that would be the ideal scenario if you pair them next to each other, so they could help each other out. That's that's rarely the case. with solar panels, then the issue is that there's nowhere in the world where you have sun 24/7 the whole year. So running on solar is not, it's not a great use case. It can be used as a way of reducing your cost basis for electricity. If you already have, I don't know, if you already have a dam or something or some other access to electricity, and then during the day if it happens to be sunny and you have some cheap panels, you could, reduce your bill from the dam. But usually those PPAs don't even work like that, and you actually have like a set amount that you need to consume, uh, you know, uh, whether it rains or there's sun outside. So with solar is definitely a harder one to figure out. I know some people are using that, but more for GPU mining. But I'm not too bullish on that one.
So, in terms of what's going on in the financial markets, we had a really big article about DeFi, which is talking about almost 200 billion locked in DeFi protocols, and looking at Binance, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Terra, Polygon, Avalanche, Clayton, Arbitrum. In terms of what's going on in the US right now with SEC's review of the Uniswap business and SEC putting pressure on Coinbase, not to have a lending protocol, what do you guys predict may happen with the growth of DeFi if this is even relevant for it? Well, I think, let me start. I think the regulation is necessary. It should be coming, but it just seems that there's just too many moving pieces to go about it in a very organized way. Um,
Yeah, I agree, Mariana. There's so much going on, and there's such huge amounts of money at stake, and it's difficult, I think, as an investor to know what's going to happen next on the regulation front. But at the same time, we're seeing articles about a record amount of DeFi fraud and pilferage going on in the first 7 months of this year, and then, of course, in August on the 11th, we had the thing where some of the the money that had been pilfered was returned. But it I think that there are some concerns on the part of consumers about this technology, and I'd love to hear what other people think about that.
it's kind of interesting to participate in some of these clubhouse rooms where people are talking, freely about their investments, whether those are NFT investments or their, token investments, and you can sort of feel the excitement that these people feel about their investment. Like if you talk to any financial advisor today and ask them like what people really don't want to talk about is their financial situation. Like it's probably one of the most challenging things to discuss with a human being. And yet in these clubhouse rooms, people are just volunteering information all day long, and they sit in these clubhouse rooms for hours upon end talking about these things. So it's almost like not just that NFTs change the perception of the crypto market, but these communities of people that are investing in the crypto market are just really excited about it because they're seeing something developing right in front of their eyes and they can participate in it. It's almost the opposite of the feeling that people have about fraudulent markets and fraudulent types of investments. So not sure how that is going to play out with regulators. What are they protecting?
I think there's a couple of things to protect here. And one is kind of like inadvertently that they're protecting against it. DeFi is not simple. It's not consumer grade right now. You gotta be relatively techy to do it. And even the best have invested in bad projects or have had somehow their laptop hacked and then lost stuff that they had on a wallet or something. On top of that, you gotta deal with the issue of impermanent loss if you happen to invest in a liquidity pool that gets lopsided. And the term impermanent loss is actually, even the guy that coined the term impermanent loss, I forget his name, but he said he shouldn't have called it that because it's that impermanent loss can essentially be forever. So um, so that's the first part. Essentially, kind of like it's an issue about the skill to use DeFi products. Then the second part of it is just the usual stuff that we got to deal with crypto, which is all the scams and all that, and all the issues that go on in all these protocols. That combined with the technical expertise that is required is prime for people to get scammed and for fraud to happen. The regulators are coming at this not even necessarily from the point of view of preventing fraud and all that. What they've been telegraphing is that um, DeFi in itself, which is essentially lending money out in a decentralized way without an intermediary as a bank in between, they're saying that essentially that would require a license. And if you're doing that, then you're doing an illegal activity. So it's kind of like, if I go and I want to go snort cocaine, cocaine is illegal on its own. Whether I'm the one selling it or buying it, if I am using it, I just happen to find it and then use it, it's illegal regardless. So I think the same thing goes for DeFi. If I'm lending money and I don't have a banking license, I'm doing something illegal. Of course, the bright side of DeFi is that it's impossible for the SEC or the CFTC to come after everybody that is participating in these protocols. But what they can do is neuter the liquidity and the adoption of the system by going and taking out the big players that are doing this. So essentially, this is going to prevent big players like Coinbase to, for example, offer DeFi products, or it could hurt other parties like BlockFi, which had been offering high interest rates for coins because they were funding themselves through DeFi. So you have a lot of situations here where the regulators cannot prohibit the activity, even though the activity itself is illegal, to be clear, but they can make examples of large players. So once they start taking out big crypto funds and they start taking out other CeFi players that play in this, and they start taking out other well-known people large enough that are playing the markets, then you start hurting the market, and then at some point it's not that liquid anymore, stops growing as much, and that just hinders the market. That said, the market can grow a lot just through the retail market. The DeFi market keeps growing, and there's a lot of people are gonna keep just adopting it, even though it's, as I mentioned, technologically challenging. So it can still grow, but it's not gonna get to institutional adoption if that's what people intend. And I don't really think that's what people intend, given that that would go against the ethos of DeFi in itself.
And I wonder how much of the regulation will actually come from the community structures. And I realize that's not something that existed so much in the past. But when you think about it, there are people in these clubhouse rooms that are warning other people in the room that they've, gotten to know and work with and, became friends, etc. And saying, hey, like I would say to Jeanette, be careful if so and so emails you and wants X, Y, and Z, that person is up to no good, and they basically have ulterior motives, and they're not really part of this community. I've heard this almost every day as well. So I wonder how much of the DAO infrastructure will actually help in regulating these environments so that people are not getting these issues that you're talking about.
I'm also really wondering a lot about money laundering and how these technologies, in some cases, are being used by bad actors. And for example, I've heard anecdotal evidence that some of the Bitcoin machines that might go into, say, a local gas station, they're incredibly profitable for the gas stations, so they love to have them. But there's also a concern that that might be a way that local criminals are sharing money with one another. And I don't know the veracity of that, but I would love to hear the panel's thoughts on that.
Are you asking specifically about Bitcoin ATMs?
Uh huh.
Oh, yeah, that would be a very, very, very bad idea to do that. We have a lot of knowledge of that, and they do better KYC than any bank. And when you deposit something, you are on live video, right? They see this in the center and they record it. So that is a really bad idea. But then, generally speaking, it's a bad idea to use any blockchain-based solutions for your criminal activity, right? That always
That's
has been
that's
somewhat of an urban myth.
yeah, I was just going to say that's really interesting because I never really thought that was true, but I've talked to some of these gas station owners and they're really conflicted about it because they believe that it's bad actors that are using their equipment, but they're putting them in there anyways because compared to the amount of money they make selling soda and cigarettes, those ATMs make them way more cash. So it's really interesting how the public opinion of these things is so different from the reality.
Yeah, and that way more cash might be anecdotal because, like, a friend of mine owns about 800 of these. They just pay a rent fee, right? So they don't actually participate in the profit, those gas stations,
That's
unless
true.
someone is running a different model, which I wouldn't advise.
No, that is true. But when you look at the profit margin they make on most of their snacks and food, I mean, there's no cost of goods really. They just give them the space to put these things in. They make money. So for a lot of local convenience stores and gas stations, that's a profit center for them.
They don't make that much. And Christian, you may know more the economics here, but my understanding is that if I put a Bitcoin ATM on a gas station or something, what I would be paying them is like $400. Even though in really good markets you could be making between 15 and even 60,000 bucks a month in profit from the ATM. But the place where
Yeah,
the ATM,
400
it's not
bucks
much.
would be on the high end actually. They usually pay less than that.
Right. So when we look at that in terms of what could be made from Bitcoin, it seems small. But when you look at it compared to what they make selling candy bars, it's a lot.
Yeah, stop selling candy bars.
Well, actually,
Beautiful stuff. Don't sell candy bars.
a lot of these
So
companies are like giving more and more floor space to these
yeah, sell
ATMs.
cocaine. Higher profit margin.
Well, yes, there are some different risks associated with that, as Daniel pointed out. But yes,
Back to NFTs from this
sorry.
from this lively discussion about gas stations. So with the NFTs this week, there were some multi-$100 million collection sales, which was really crazy, all in one week. So the loot, for adventurers, there's different kinds of loot out there, so you got to look for the right one. Is the top selling NFT collection this past week with 194.82 million in global sales, and these are just basically these white, text writing on a black background. There is no art on this, period, on that sale. The Mutant Ape Yacht Club, which one would think, okay, it's a derivative of a derivative of the yacht club that already sold very well. That thing made 124.16 million in total sales last week. There, now these are beautiful, designs, but that's basically a non-existent brand. And then the Inertial Moment NFT collection pulled 63.5 million in sales last week. Axie Infinity, which is the actual in-game play, which has sort of like a cross between NFTs and DeFi. You have to stake your high-end NFTs, et cetera, et cetera. They got 148.5 million in sales during the week, and so they're just an enormous amount of sales of things that no one's heard of before, the week or 2 weeks before that. How do you think all this is happening, and how much longer are we in for it?
Can I chime in on that, uh, Marina?
Yes. Hello.
Hello, yeah, I'm actually fairly new to this space in terms of the NFT market. But I'm coming in it from a data-driven kind of marketing perspective, and touch upon. I think the key is community, not only within Clubhouse, and I've been joining the discords of the different launches because I'm gonna put together like like a data as a service for for assessing back launches and going forward, right? For the new upcoming launches. And I think the key, and you mentioned it from Clubhouse, but it's also the key to the success of quote unquote unknown, new drops as they call them, or like the Ape Yacht Club, which was relaunched as a mutant, I guess, launch. And the other ones, because what's happening, and I see that in the Discord, uh, and it's I see it as a kind of a social play and also a technical play, and it's an intersection between the blockchain, the community, the metaverse, and the platforms obviously going forward, right? Uh, that's on the collection type side of the launches. Uh, the main thing that I'm seeing is there are teams behind all of these launches, and people don't realize, especially people like who are coming, for example, to the clubhouse rooms, who think that oh yeah, I'm gonna put my collection of like 100 photographs from across the world, and tomorrow I'm gonna make XYZ $1 million. That doesn't happen that way. They have a real launch team. It takes 2, 3, 4 months to work with a community manager, with a marketing manager, with a business development manager, with somebody who knows the whole financial structure. And again, the amazing thing about it is we're at 0.5, I think, percent of the capacity going forward, because uh, for example, OpenSea, which is the major platform, as I understand, uh, currently does not take credit cards. So, for example, the general market is not going to be technically savvy to go and buy the NFTs, even though they want to partake in this situation. They're not going to go to the drop site and mint their own, NFT. So going forward, I think there's a huge potential, and not only for the art pieces. This is just presentation, a representation of the tokenization that can happen in any case study. And beyond that, and there's an interesting launch right now with a gallery in London, and I was in a room today. I think it's called Unit London, and what they're doing is they're actually they've worked with 90, and this is for single piece art, not necessarily uh, not collection, right? And they're actually creating their own platform because they want to enable people to pay them via credit cards, so the general public can partake alongside the tech savvy crowd. And it's going to be extremely interesting that you can go, it's via NFT tips, they're heading it. So again, they have a whole team, and this gallery is selling, works of art for thousands of pounds, and in this case, they're going to enable people to get on the art pieces for obviously lower prices, and uh, and go from there. So I see a huge potential, and that's why going forward, we're positioning ourselves to assist creators, and because and now another point that I learned from the app is both artists and creators, alike, a wide variety of different fields, uh, really want to get into this space but don't have the capacity, or they want to create, they don't want to mint or market, or have maintain a community initially and going forward. So
Yeah,
there's a huge opportunity. Yes, go ahead, sorry,
great. Thank you,
apologize.
Ron. Well, I mean, this brings up a point for me, and I wonder how much of some of these aspects of the boom in this space is about investing as entertainment. I mean, is there a sense that you're not going to get too excited about watching the money you put into bonds, right? It just doesn't move that fast. But things move so quickly, and the community aspect of it can actually change the value of it. So participating in the community can help make your investment more valuable. I wonder if there is sort of an investment as entertainment model going on here.
Well, I think it's even beyond that because, what Ron was saying earlier, people are creating businesses to create communities in essence. There's a concerted effort in each of the drops. They've been super successful because even if you create a venture right now in any of the innovation spaces, you're not going to have $200 million sales of, in a week. So these are some of the, I would say, greatest business opportunities in our lifetime is to create these worlds. Going into now creating gaming companies and other companies surrounding these NFT drops is like the next generation of ventures. It's almost like an incubator that is sort of scaling as fast as some of these first products are out, which is really fascinating to watch. If you look at the traditional world of branding, we have NFL now. One of our articles talks about NFL barring teams from participating in certain cryptocurrency and NFT ventures. I mean, is that even? I mean, is that even legal? Don't I know that NFL owns the teams and they own also the players in many different formats of media, but do they really own them in this cryptocurrency space? What do you guys think?
It will always depend on the individual contracts. So they're not all the same for players, right?
Yeah, but this says, I think I agree with you. And I think it also has the meaning when, we did sports programming at Media Zone, we worked with every league, on planet Earth. And most of the leagues try to hold on to any branding associated with the teams and associated with the players when it comes to television promotion and marketing, web marketing, mobile deals, et cetera, et cetera. But you have so many athletes now having their own NFT deals, their own cryptocurrency deals, and have been part of cryptocurrency ventures. Can they really stop this train? I don't know if they even have the rights in those existing. I saw some of the existing contracts, and at that time there was no cryptocurrency, so I'm not sure if they have to make that as part of the new contracts going forward.
Yeah, no, they're already doing that. Yeah.
But I
Makes
wonder too how much you can. I mean, you can certainly regulate that an NFL player can't use the letters NFL in their drop. But can you actually regulate that a person's photo and name cannot be associated with something?
Yeah, they do actually. Like if you look at some of the games that were done with fantasy football, etc. We were working on those. You actually have to get the league approval to do the likeness of the players, etc.
Wow. Okay.
So they own you. They own you. No
I
matter how much you make, they still own you
I
as a
guess it just
brand.
comes down to who's got more money to pay for lawyers. Maybe. It seems like that's where it would go.
It's just interesting because you look at Socios and Chili's, and their strategy has been to sign every club. And we tried to do this when I was in Media Zone. We worked with all the European League clubs, soccer clubs, etc. And I think Socio is trying to go beyond those original contracts, and they've been quite successful so far. I just wonder, what other leagues on our planet are going to join NFL in this effort. But it seems like everybody's trying to get a piece here of the business.
Well, I think MLB will be right behind them.
Yeah, definitely. NBA, MLB, they all have very strong contracts. Um, I think it's interesting to notice that there aren't that many other brands in the world that are trying to, the studios have not tried to reach into some of these successful raises like Stoner Cats, etc. Do you guys foresee that happening? I suspect they may be next.
Yeah, we're actually helping one studio exactly with that. We're doing a seminar for them in this month. And so they're going to be investor in us, and we'll help them invest in related projects.
And would they keep the rights to, their look in the past, the studios had the rights to the programming, at least here in the US, either producers or distributors of programming kind of owned film and television programming. And now Netflix and Amazon basically own it. So are they trying to extend their contracts so they also own the NFT rights?
Yeah, most certainly, but it's always more complex, right? It's super detailed, really, because there's a lot of different use cases, obviously, also just for NFTs, where you can associate them to a bunch of different ideas, a bunch of different real world items, right? So that's the more interesting part long term, anyway. So we're just still very early at this paradigm. But yeah, so this whole digital collectible piece and hot potato game, that part is not all that interesting. What we're actually working on right now, that's the interesting piece, where you have actual rights associated with NFTs that go beyond just being the rightful owner of some PNG or something.
Yeah, when you have the actual media rights associated with it.
Yeah,
And
resell rights, or
yeah.
otherwise you'll be able to produce certain types of clothing, or whatever the case might be in individual franchise, right?
And we've been looking at these models, Christian, for years and years of looking at media business, and to some extent sports business. They were really in sort of subscription and advertising businesses. So someone subscribes to go to watch a program on television and or get access to Netflix, or somebody is advertised to like on ad supported TV or ad supported OTT, etc. But the one thing that never really happened for media companies is they never get access to the e-commerce sales of products and services that are related to the viewing of that media product. They never really connected the dots on that, and mostly due to technology problems. Do you foresee that NFTs would allow media companies to kind of dip into that pool of e-commerce sales?
Is it a question for me?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, entirely. But it's going to be, again, more nuanced, right? And it's not kind of a wholesale uh, sale of rights, right? It's going to be very, very nuanced. And those are ideas that we've mapped out for a long time, right? So we were talking about one quote unquote tokenization project right now where producers of audio content will actually now again produce the long plays for those, and there's going to be limited editions, and you can buy those rights for those long plays using NFTs.
I like that. I think I was mostly referring, I don't know if you thought of this, but for years we have seen these from delivery agents and variety of other companies I was involved in. People were using optical solutions to see something on TV and then buy a product. They were using sound solutions, like beacons, etc. Is there a connection between an NFT? I get a program delivered to me, and it contains not just the content, not just the advertising, not just the premium, if it's premium VOD or whatever cost, but also gives me all the other products and services inside that programming that I can purchase, or whatever is edited for me. Do you see anything like that happening right now?
Well, we looked at the nascent developments of some of these solutions, but as I said, they're still nascent because mustn't forget we still don't have the underlying delivery mechanisms. Those are all still being built within the Web3 stack, like so. The decentralized addressing, the decentralized bandwidth, and like the option to actually measure this granularly. So we internally referred to this topic for a long time as streaming money, but then also streaming content in a way where you measure it by the second, essentially. Something that's very, very normal in the context of telecommunications, right? And so there's a lot of parallel developments in that regard right now that we're involved with and that we know of.
So
But
you could track where you are in
it's
the
it's
programming, right?
yeah, yeah, it's nascent. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so there were a bunch of technologies trying to do that before online, and, kind of OTT, but they've never quite taken off because by the time the programming was out in the past, before streaming, it would be a year and a half later. So whatever was in that programming would be very hard to actually sell to anyone because it's no longer available. But now with these streamers, it seems that the programming gets made very fast and then distributed right away, so we kind of cut the timing on the actual content, video content delivery. And I feel we will probably be able to connect that with commerce a little bit more efficiently. But I've seen so many of these plays over the last 2 decades. It would be fun to see one actually happen. So finally, community, the DAOs, the community creation. I think I agree with Jeanette that loot has changed the gameplay, pun intended, that the communities that were created in like days' time based on loot, with people actually creating, taking that list of things and then creating digital art out of it, and then creating communities surrounding that, people who created guilds and across different loot bags to be in the same guild because we all own a ring, etc. um, that was a new formation of community. And then people who are actually now creating games, on top using these loot bags, that's the third formation of the type of community that loot itself generated. Are we going to be evolving the creation and the sort of growth of communities, as with NFTs and DeFi and DAOs and what's going on in this marketplace?
One of the things that I think is really interesting about this evolution is the democratization of the cash in the community, right? In the past, when communities got created, the person who started the community maybe makes some money. They monetize that, but there's not as much money to be made for the members of the community. But I think these technologies are allowing participants to get paid in a way like never before.
Yeah, get paid, get invested in a community. So it seems a lot more fun to get on, on one of these clubhouse discussions and share what I know about XYZ project because I've spoken to the founders or I've been following it in media or I have some information from a conference. I'm much more likely to go share that information inside that community because other people have shared their information and the source of their information, and it seems that everyone is benefiting from this shared pool of information. Same with maintaining nodes, same with some of the technology work, same with artists collaborating and doing these drops and creating these communities that Ron was discussing, with people having different functions in the community, getting the projects out and sold. It seems like there's more benefit to each member, and it's not just intrinsic, it's actually also financial benefit. I think this will continue. I think these sort of informal and then maybe formal communities will continue, and I'm seeing many many different formats being formed every day. Like one of the formats that I thought was very unusual was a company I was talking to in Silicon Valley that was, came out of the Draper University. And I introduced him actually to Christian. They were trying to work on the identity um, on the blockchain, which is a very, very challenging topic. And he pointed out all the, things they need to think about, which they are. But what they've done well in the meantime is help a bunch of players with Axie Infinity gain access to the game, and they're actually tracking their performance and making sure that they're getting paid, and the players are getting paid. And I thought, God, that was really a novel idea, and it seems kind of like a great entrepreneur thinking through different ways of starting up the new company. And then I realized that another company I was working with, the CEO was involved in a DAO that was doing this, and then supporting these game players. And I've heard it maybe 5 or 6 times. I think Andreessen Horowitz invested in something that was doing similar things, trying to help people in Malaysia, you know, get inside the game and start generating revenue for themselves and for the investors in this space. So I feel that those kinds of communities, they're basically arbitraging success in this space, will be forming, and I think that we're going to see many different formats in the next quarter or two.
I totally agree, and I wonder how much of an effect the pandemic has had on all of this from two perspectives. One is, I think the pandemic fundamentally changed the way many people in the world looked at work. And I think this was a moment when a lot of people reassessed how they were working, who they were working for, what they were getting out of it. And so there was sort of a shakeup that happened there. And you also had a tremendous number of artists who are used to working together, collaborating together in real life, in real time, frustrated because they couldn't do that and seeking new ways to connect and create. So I think those two paradigms really helped move this whole space forward a lot more quickly.
Yeah, it speeds it up, but and I agree with you. Being able to Zoom with anywhere on planet Earth and have people here in this room anywhere on planet Earth is just awesome, because you're naturally getting top tier talent to sort of rise to the top, and help kind of spearhead some of these things and some of these community creations. But also, I think it's the success that's driving it. I've never, pandemic or not, the success in this market has always been there, but you're saying maybe because of connectivity, it's even more pronounced.
I think it's the connectivity, but more so it's that people are actively seeking new ways to make money and new ways to create. And I think that is the connectivity is an issue, but I also think, like, emotionally and spiritually, just this idea, oh, I just have to go to work and I just have to drive for 4 hours a day, and a lot of that has changed temporarily, and I wonder how much that has kind of created a new generation of content makers and community members.
Yeah, it's a very compelling opportunity, um, to sort of reassess your life, and most of us have kind of gone deep into, like, what do I really want out of life in a year and a half of being somewhat sequestered, inside. But I suspect that if I found Clubhouse at any other time in my life, I would have been quite excited about it as well, because I find that people sharing ideas and people helping other people, that is really the true form of community. And I don't think I experienced it in the same way with some of the other tools that we kind of gotten, during the pandemic. I don't feel the same way with Zoom, for example.
No, I agree. I agree, Mariana. Oh, we have a question. Okay, Tony, you got just a minute. We're just about out of time. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. What's going on, Ryan?
We're talking about DeFi, NFTs, and DAOs.
Hmm. Okay.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just didn't understand it. Yeah, I just want to know what's a DeFi.
Uh,
Oh, DeFi is decentralized finance. as opposed to centralized finance, which, traditional finance as we know it. And many of these DeFi protocols launched over this they launched many years ago, but they grew quite significantly in 2020. So we have an event on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. where
Okay.
we define all of these things. We'll literally, I mean, Jeanette manages it, and she'll go through, what is DeFi and what are the top protocols and how is it different than centralized finance, and what's an NFT and how can you mint one. So like all the basics. And you can join us then for sure. It's every Tuesday at 10 a.m. So with that, I think thank you for asking the question. Though we love the fact that people are getting more information with each of these sessions. That's why we host them. Next week we have the virtual Infiom Salon on Wednesday at 12:30 p.m. followed by this event where we bring all of our speakers as well as Christian, Daniel, and Jeanette, and all of our usual weekly speakers. We bring speakers from the virtual Infiom Salon into the clubhouse, and we asked them Q&A regarding their presentations. The virtual Infiom Salons you can find on Eventbrite, and you can also find them on our website, infiom.com. They're free. You can just sign up and join us to see the presentations of the CEOs, investors, and heads of innovation of Fortune 500s. And then we do this session that I was mentioning earlier every Tuesday at 10 a.m. that gives us the definition and basic information and answers any questions about NFTs, DeFi, and DAOs.
And don't forget to sign up for the mailing list on Infiom.com. There is a fantastic newsletter that goes out every Sunday with some of the hottest news in this space, customized for your area of interest.
It's an AI powered newsletter. So if you're interested more in NFTs, you get more NFTs news and DeFi, more DeFi, etc. And then we'll discuss some of the top articles here on Wednesdays as well. So thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, Daniel and Christian and Nicola and our entire team, Kristen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Ron for asking questions, Gina for coming back, Yuri from coming back, and David. And we look forward to Arena as well and Pamela seeing you guys next week in these same rooms.
Thanks so much, everybody.